Hello and welcome back to the Not Your Neurotypical Fitness podcast. And I am blessed with yet another fantastic guest today. We have the amazing Gracie on today, who is here to have a chat on all things neurodiversity and mental health, which is it's a topic very close to my heart, and it's something that I think we need to have more discussions about, and especially now when there is quite a lot of, and I don't know if what you're noticing and seeing with your algorithm and things pop up, but it feels like at the moment the sort of the chat and talk around neurodiversity feels very negative. It feels very everyone's got it, everyone wants it, and I think it's starting to make people who are looking for answers or who have been diagnosed it's bringing up a lot of like, oh, well, do I have it? And oh, am I just this? And quite a lot of negativity. So I wanted to have this chat for people who are in that boat, who are maybe struggling, to validate it, give them some support and answers. But before we go into that, have you sort of seen that side of it, or is it just me and my lens of what's popping up on my social media?
I feel like I see more where it's neurodivergent creators posting about it as opposed to seeing the actual stuff.
Sure, yeah,
People
yeah.
are saying thing themselves. But yeah, definitely. I mean, there is just so much information now, which can obviously is in many ways an amazing thing, but can also be very confusing and sort of you can get really stuck in certain ways of thinking or really obsessed with certain like areas. And then not sort of maybe get a full picture. And yeah, definitely can be confusing for people.
It's a blessing and a curse, isn't it? But we are
Yeah.
going to be talking about not necessarily a curse, but about some of the, I guess, darker side of it, because as much as I like to talk about the positives, and I'm very much about empowering people and moving forward, and I don't like the whole it's just a superpower, this, that, and the other. And I do think we need to talk about the not so great stuff as well, because when you can understand the not so great stuff and challenges, then that gives you leverage to move forward with it, right? But before we
Mhm.
go into that, Gracie, do you mind just giving people a bit of an introduction to yourself, kind of the work you do online with social media, and where people can find you on social media as well?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Gracie. Um, I guess in terms of my journey to where I am now with social media, I started posting quite casually on TikTok a couple of years ago, and then more recently have been fortunate enough to have received a lot of therapy myself, and also in my current like paid job, I work full time for a mental health service.
Okay.
So I felt like I had a lot of experience that I know I'm very privileged to have gotten. And so I felt like it was a great way to kind of share it with people who maybe didn't know as much about certain things or hadn't been able to access certain things. So started posting more consistently on TikTok and then now post primarily on Instagram. I don't really use TikTok anymore. But my like art is Gracie Ladybird, which unfortunately isn't my actual last name. But it's kind of like a symbol for me. So that's why I had that as my username. But yeah, and then I guess it's interesting as well talking about neurodivergence and mental health because my background is pretty much solely mental health up until the past year when I
Mm.
found out I was autistic, which came as a huge shock. So my page, I mainly talk about mental health, but from the perspective of being neurodivergent and how that can make those experiences different and unique, and how you can understand and improve your mental health when you are neurodivergent.
I love it. And that's why we're here today. And before we get stuck into that, do you mind me asking what the ladybird is a symbol of?
Yeah, it's just when I was born, my grandma said that I looked like a ladybird because I had big eyes, which I don't know. I don't think ladybirds do have big eyes, so I don't even know where she sort of pulled that out from. But then my whole life, she's just called me Ladybird, and I have a tattoo of a ladybird.
I love
And I feel like I don't know if it's like if this is accurate, but a lot of people that I've met who are similar to myself, either like mental health or neurodivergent, ladybird seems quite like a popular symbol. I think that
thing.
they're beautiful bugs, and I think even just the idea of bugs in general, I like. So yeah, that's kind of where that came from.
Oh, I love it. I always love a little symbol or metaphor or things. And sometimes I find
Yeah.
it really funny. It's like when people have tattoos, I'm like, oh, does that have a deep meaning? And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people are like, no, I just like fish, mate.
No.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like all my tattoos have meaning, and then like a lot of the time I have loads of like croissant themed things, and someone once asked like, is that like symbolic of something, of like, like something like on the outside's different to the in. I was like, nah, I just love
No,
paper.
I just like croissants, yeah.
Whereas all these, they all have meaning and stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so you said that your journey into sort of actually being diagnosed as
Mhm.
autistic was almost like unexpected. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Everyone's
It was so
diagnosis and journey is so different and interesting.
yeah, honestly. So I guess going back, so I was diagnosed with OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder,
Okay.
when I was 12 or 13. So for a long time, I thought that's where all my problems come from, is I have OCD. And then when I was 19, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So again, we're sort of reevaluating, okay, this is what I'm living with, this is what I have, this is where my difficulties are coming from. And then that was obviously, I feel like a lot of people, especially undiagnosed neurodivergent people, will have received diagnoses of also like anxiety and depression at various stages as well. So that was kind of in there. And then in the summer of 2024, I'd just graduated uni. And actually, on the day of my graduation, I was driving to Bristol with my mum. And she was like, "Oh, I've been wanting to speak to you about something, but I don't want you to get upset." And I was like, "Right, we are on the way to my graduation. So maybe this could have waited." But she was like, "Oh, I've been thinking, and I think you might be autistic." And she works as a special educational needs coordinator in a school. So she knows quite a lot about neurodivergence. And it was really weird because I'd never considered it up until that point. I'd read quite a lot about it online, but just thought like, no, that's definitely not me. Um, but over the recent months leading up until my graduation, I'd seen like more sort of niche bits and been like, oh, okay, actually, I do really relate to that. Um, and then kind of that coincided with me leaving full-time education for the first time in my life. So all sort of structure and purpose was removed from my life. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was like working full time and then trying to find like a job that I'd be more interested in. But I was basically just lost my shit essentially. Like I was really, really spiraling. And those autistic traits that I kind of always displayed to an extent became really, really pronounced. And I feel like for me, it was largely because I didn't have that like structure that was sort of
Sure.
holding me and that way to channel it. Because I'd always loved education. So I think being out of that, it was just like, where can all of this sort of go? And so it spilled over into every area of my life. And then I moved back to Bristol in October, went to my GP and got referred. And then I got diagnosed with autism in April 2025. So yeah, last year.
Mm. And was it kind of one of those moments where it felt like, oh, it makes sense? Was there almost like disbelief? Because when you've grown up thinking you are a certain way, and when you do also get other labels, and then you get told it's something else, there's a lot of different sort of emotions that can come with
Mm.
that. So what was it like for you? Because there's a lot of speaking. I know I definitely went through the process of that re-grief of like a period of,
Mm.
oh, I'm not this completely weird, broken, useless human being. Actually, there's explanations for all of these things. But then that stage of, but if someone had known it was ADHD and not you're anxious or you're high achieve, all these things, my life could have looked different. What was that period like for you?
Yeah, I guess in one way it was really, really difficult. I think because I'm like a very perfectionistic person and like very proactive in sort of trying to help myself with my mental health. So when
Mm,
I thought it was borderline personality disorder, that you can go into remission for that. You can get to a point where you're not living with it anymore.
sure.
Through attachment, like trauma focused therapy. So I'd been very committed to that and very much like I'm gonna work as hard as I have to
Yeah.
and do as much as I have to so that I don't have these difficulties anymore.
Hmm.
And then when I found out I had autism, I was like, oh, okay, I actually can't therapy my way out of this. I can't medication my way out of this. I'm going to have this for life. And it's kind of a part of who I am. So I feel like there was a real sort of like identity death. I don't know if that sounds quite dramatic, but a lot of the parts of myself that I kind of valued before, I felt sort of slip away. And it sort of made me see myself in a different way and sort of my life in a really different way, which I found really difficult. But like you've said, there was also the other side then of kind of memories just coming back out of nowhere of my childhood and being like, oh my God, like how did nobody pick up on this? And feeling like, God, it really does explain a lot. It explains what like why I've struggled so much with certain things and friendships and all of that sort of thing. So in that way, it was really validating. But again, like you said, with that feeling really sad for myself as a child and the way that I was labelled and the way that my behaviour was interpreted, rather than being autistic as being dramatic or intense or rigid and those sorts of things. So
Absolutely, absolutely. So in your journey, you said you had quite a few different sort of diagnoses presented in terms of like OCD, BPD, and obviously this is really, really common, and I've definitely seen it a lot more speaking to people where they've had these diagnoses throughout their life that weren't ADHD or autism because of the kind of misunderstanding of what they were. You know, it was
yeah,
because it was studied on boys. You have a very sort of typical autistic boy, you know, obviously an autism, as everything is on a spectrum, but it's very much usually a male who likes trains, can't look you in the eye. It's a very sort of textbook picture the same with ADHD. So we kind of slipped the cracks. So for yourself, with these, just for from your story, with these diagnoses that you had, were any of them, from your understanding, of course, misdiagnosis, but also there's a lot of comorbidity, isn't there? In
Yeah.
terms of like, OCD is neurodiversity. So with where you're at now, do you now know that any of these were wrongly diagnosed, or actually were they correct, but they just didn't also pick up on the right things? And then just to expand on that and throw many questions at once, do you think any of them were maybe caused by not understanding your neurodiversity? So just to give you my story for context, I had anxiety, depression, eating disorders. Now, I don't think necessarily misdiagnosed, but I definitely think that my anxiety was actually a projection of not having diagnosed and managed ADHD and
Yeah,
potentially
sure.
autism, but apparently I'm too high functioning for autism, but that's something for another day. So for yourself, what do you think is your sort of story with it?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, and I think so with OCD, that genetically runs in my family. So
Sure.
like multiple members of my family have it. So I think for me that feels like still really accurate, and it's something I still really struggle with. And then with borderline personality disorder, and this can apply to like emotionally unstable personality disorder, complex emotional needs, all those sorts of labels. I read a lot about people who did feel like it was a misdiagnosis, and then after they got diagnosed with autism and or ADHD, they were like, that really fits me more than the BPD diagnosis. But I think there are high rates of misdiagnosis and also comorbidity. So I think with misdiagnosis, oftentimes it is women, because personality disorders are like, you're way more likely to be diagnosed with personality disorder if you're a woman. I think because it's quite sexist the way that the diagnosis
Yeah.
is understood in a lot of ways. And then obviously conversely with autism, you're more likely to be diagnosed if you're a male. So I think with misdiagnosis, a lot of that is definitely a gender issue. I know that will also impact people based on like race, like gender presentation, lots of different things. But then also with comorbidity, something that I'm really interested in, that I've read a lot about, is how being undiagnosed, autistic and ADHD can lead you to be more likely to have experienced complex trauma in your early life. So I think for me, there was a lot of sort of attachment trauma and sort of abuse in the home when I was younger. So that was what I'd sort of attributed why I had BPD, like, to that. But also I think as well, being an undiagnosed autistic person, if you're like high masking, or you're in an environment where your neurodivergence is labeled in like an invalidating way, can also like lead to interpersonal trauma and lead you to develop this really negative sense of self, like you said, anxiety, depression, and struggle with things later on. So I think it would make sense that there would be that high rates of people having both like complex post-traumatic stress disorder, a personality disorder, and then also a late diagnosis of autism and or ADHD.
That's really interesting what you said there as well, because I've seen a lot of discourse in this kind of negative space at the moment about people saying that, trauma, people that have trauma trauma presents itself as ADHD and autistic. People don't have ADHD and autism, it's just trauma presenting it. But actually what you're kind of saying is it's kind of the other way around, that actually being undiagnosed and then having these issues because you don't know how to manage them correctly, they actually leave more trauma because
Yeah.
you don't know how to manage. Yeah, it's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, I think as well, because a friend of mine who I'd sort of said to her, oh, I think you could be autistic. She was like, well, I did consider getting a diagnosis, but because of my family history, I know that they would just say, oh, you have trauma, you don't have autism, and would kind of dismiss the presence of autistic traits based on her like life
Mad, isn't it?
experiences. Yeah, and I think part of that is as well, being a woman, I think they are more likely to do that.
Yeah.
But I think as well that I read a study that I can't, this was a while ago, so I can't like directly quote it or anything,
Sure.
that was saying how autistic people, and I think potentially people with ADHD, if you think about things like rejection sensitivity dysphoria, are more likely to be traumatized by something that a neurotypical person wouldn't be
Yeah,
traumatized
100%.
by.
Yeah.
Even like sensory things with autism, changes in routine, like the rejection sensitivity dysphoria, things like that. So yeah, I think that is definitely something that like I would love if my work took me in the direction of like research and things around trauma and
Oh my God, yeah.
neurodivergence.
If you do, like, please, like, just fill me in on everything because
Yeah,
it's so interesting. Saying that then just made me have like this is why I love these conversations, because I get so many light bulbs. So I did some mindset therapy based coaching a few years ago because I was really struggling with my confidence as a
Mhm.
business owner, and I didn't realize at that point I had ADHD. And something we unpacked was this sense of like not feeling good enough from like
Mhm.
childhood traumas. And like when we think of trauma, we also think of big things, and they can be, right? Like abuse and
Mhm.
neglect. And these little memories that had left traumas in my brain were really, again, things that a neurotypical might not care about. So one of them was I was always seen as like the good kid at school, and I was playing around, messing around with my friends a little bit, and we ran down the corridor, and you had to walk down the corridor at school. I
Mhm.
remember the head teacher, we ran past the head teacher's office, and she got really angry. We went to sit in there, and the shame of being in the head teacher's office, I still remember that. And I remember nothing else about being like 5. And then
Yeah.
another one was when my brother got a part in the West End as a child actor, which was amazing. But I didn't feel, because I remember him getting the call, them getting the call, and he got the part. And I remember not feeling happy for him, but
Mhm.
feeling, well, what am I good at? I'm useless. And that
Yeah.
experience like sat with me with so much guilt and shame and never feeling good enough in that family, which is not true. Like my parents are fucking, I mean, I don't want anyone to think they neglected me. They were class. Like we were all equals. They back me to the high heavens, but I always had that. And now I
Yeah.
understand it's RSD. And that's
Yeah.
why it sat with me so much. But and it carried me into adulthood. I had to get this therapy to work through it all. And it's mad, isn't it, when you actually start to unpack it? So yeah, thank you for giving me that light bulb moment, because that's
Yeah.
made
No.
me go, that all makes sense now, doesn't it? It really does. Amazing. So with obviously then this sort of like comorbidity, misdiagnosis, because this is where it really starts to get quite complicated, doesn't it? And this is why I do think diagnosis is important. Like I did a post about it the other day, and it's gone a bit viral for the wrong reasons of people going, I really want a label for ADHD. I'm like, yes, but the label helps you to understand it and then starts to unpack the experiences you're going through. Because if whether it's comorbidity or misdiagnosis, right? You go to the doctors, you say you're feeling a certain way, and you just get told it's anxiety because you're autistic, overstimulated as hell, living in a neurotypical world, and you don't understand why you feel so overstimulated with changes in routines and this, that, and the other. Like, when you lost the education system, much more anxious. And I definitely experienced that myself, out of routine into this university life. And I was like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, you're just an anxious girly. Well, now I understand it's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
But if people then aren't getting the right answers and they're getting the wrong answers, they're not then getting the right help, right? Like, so
Yeah.
this is where it's so important that we are getting the label. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think diagnosis is such a tricky one. I personally, for me, it felt so important for me to get the diagnosis
Mm.
because I think as well, even like everything we've spoken about, where you can have a lot of people will have like doubt themselves, have like a very negative perception of themselves. So then, even if you're like pretty convinced that you have autism or ADHD, there's going to be a part of you that's like, no, you don't. You're making it up. You're
Mm.
making it up for attention. You're lying or being dramatic, whatever. So I think having somebody say to you, no, you do actually have this thing. Is it's like a weight off your shoulders. I mean, I have the formal diagnosis, but I still get like, oh my god, what if I was lying in my assessment and I
Yes.
actually don't have it? But I think it is just like a weight off your shoulders in terms of the way that you can view yourself. Also, as well, being able to say to other people, even if you can't access formal support, being able to say to friends and family, if you're dating, this is something I struggle with. These are the things that like impact me that you might want to help me with or be aware of, or that sort of thing is massively helpful. And then, obviously, as well, I think I've read a lot about people's experiences with certain types of therapy that didn't know they were neurodivergent. And because they weren't accessing therapy that was tailored to somebody who is neurodivergent, it was actually quite harmful for them and didn't help them, maybe re traumatize them, was really difficult. So I think when you're seeking support, being able to say, this is something I struggle with, is really, I mean, it's important in every area. Work, I know that I've had like reasonable adjustments where I work, and that's been really helpful. Yeah, I mean the wait lists are crazy. Like I waited just over a year for my ADHD assessment, but they nearly extended it by another year. But then I complained, so they didn't. But obviously, I think it is really important to a lot of people, and I can definitely see why. Like it was so important to me as well.
I guess you could argue as well that it's making sure you're actually solving the right problem. Because, like you said, there,
Yeah.
therapy and it doesn't work. If you go to a doctor and say you're anxious, um, and you just get put on beta blockers or just get told to do these. And don't get me wrong, these things can help, but actually the problem is that you're overstimulated
Mhm.
or you're struggling with changes in routine, then you need to be working on that, right? Like that's the problem to
Yeah,
solve versus medication or other tools that might help a little bit. And this is then when people can really feel broken that I've got, and this is how I felt. I remember like, right, I've been told I've got anxiety and then I'm taking these tablets and it was depression. That was the one I got told, I was on SSRIs, told you depressed, this, that, and the other. And I still just didn't feel right. And then you feel even
yeah,
more broken, like, oh my God, I'm taking these drugs and I'm doing this thing. And I'm speaking to this counselor and I still don't feel better. And that can
yeah,
then make mental health worse. And then people are in this kind of
100%.
like mental health spiral and in not a good way, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, like if you think about being in that situation, you're trying everything, you're on medication, you're doing therapy, you're doing CBT, you're doing all your techniques, whatever, and nothing is working. That for me feels like a recipe for somebody them being in crisis because
Oh,
of the
100%.
hopelessness around
Yeah, there's
that.
no hope, is there?
And
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
I think it's the same with physical health. If you have headaches for a year and you have no idea why, and they've told you it's this, and you're doing all the right things, and it's not improving, you'd feel hopeless. And then if somebody said, actually, no, it is this thing, and there are things that you can do, even if you don't get formal support, even if all you get is self-understanding and you can research and you can talk to people, that makes a massive difference.
100%.
100%.
I mean, I look back at like a very sort of dark period in my life when you were sort of saying that they're at the crisis point, and that's where I was. I was doing all the things, and it was like, but nothing's making me feel better. And even
Mhm.
if I hadn't accessed support, I think if I'd just known why, the weight
Yeah.
off the shoulders would have been enough to take me from up here to here. Because I think, especially the irony of being neurodivergent is they generally very high achieving perfectionist people who just want answers, who just want to be the best they can be. And when they don't feel that,
Mm.
so yeah,
Yeah, I think yeah, because I think obviously the a lot of the reason why people can go so long being undiagnosed is because they're quite high masking, obviously. So yeah.
amazing. So your page is absolutely fantastic, and one of my favorite neuro. I'm not just blowing smoke because you're here. Is that it's really validating but full of solutions. I'm very anti the whole just talking about the negatives and the dark side of
Yeah.
diversity and doom and gloom, and it makes you feel stuck. Like I get it, valid, like we were saying here, validation, understanding why is beautiful, but if you're just saying, but there's just more problems, we're then in the
Mhm.
stuck. But you're brilliant at showing the problems, the challenges. This is exactly what's happening for you, and it's dark and it's not always great, but this is what I'm doing, or this is what I did, and here are some solutions. And it's really, it's empowering, it's inspiring for people, which is
Thank
fantastic.
you so
And
much. Thank you.
you talk a lot about and I wanted to sort of chat a bit about sort of the burnout side of things and sort of how to come out of that because that is talked about a lot. But I think in a sort of general sense, the word is thrown about a bit too much, a bit like, terms like, oh, I've got anxiety when you're just a bit anxious. I feel burnout's kind of used in that term of, I'm just a bit stressed. And I think we've all kind of people have overused it. So I now think some people are actually scared almost, and especially those high achieving people who don't want to say they're burnt out if they are, am I actually burnt out? Don't necessarily realize it's burnout, but
Mhm.
it is. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience with the burnout and how you came to the realization that this is actually what's happening for me right now?
Yeah, so I think my first period of burnout was preceding my diagnosis. So from about after that graduation, I kind of just started to go like this. And for me, obviously at the time I didn't have a diagnosis, but I was looking a lot into autism. To me, the signs of burnout are if you think about the ways that you like struggle with autism, the challenges that you might face, the sensory difficulties, difficulties with plans changing, communication, any sort of traits that you have will just become more heightened. So your sensory issues will get worse. You'll find it harder to like cope with a change in routine. You'll find it harder to communicate with people. You'll find it a lot harder to mask. So I think that would be how I would sort of describe like the signs showing
Yeah.
up is think about the things that you might normally struggle with and notice, and then they start to be like times by 10. Emotional regulation gets a lot harder. So for me, it just yeah, my emotional regulation started to get really, I was crying like every single day about like I'd gone to my food shop and they didn't have peppers in Lidl. And that was like part of what I needed in my food shop. And
Yeah.
I was with my mum, I remember, and I ran out and I ran behind the Lidl and was just sat on the floor crying because I couldn't take it. I was like, I cannot even like think through how I'm going to get past this minor change in
Yeah.
like what I'd planned. And
Yeah.
it was so just like hard for me to deal with really, really small things like that. I think as well, I started to notice that like communicating and being around other people felt really, really draining. Eye contact became a lot harder. I couldn't think of things to say as quickly. And I think for me at that time, that was the lowest my mental health has ever been in my life, was in autistic burnout. I felt honestly like a level of exhaustion that I can't even describe. It was like my limbs were like 50 kilograms heavier than normal.
Mm.
I just felt knackered and I wasn't sleeping. I had like really bad insomnia. I had really bad constipation. So my physical body as well was just completely exhausted.
I struggle.
Um, but yeah, that was at that point, I was signed off work for the first time and had gone home and said to my mum, like, I can't keep going. I can't do this. I do not know what to do. Like, I'm actually terrified of how I feel. And like my mum was like phoning the mental health team and saying like, can she be hospitalized? Like, how can we get her in hospital? Because I was just at quite high risk as well. And then I mean, for me in that period, so actually the week after I was signed off work, I then lost my best friend, died like out of nowhere. So it was just the worst year of my life, pretty much. But
Oh,
I think this time when I was in burnout, it was similar sort of things, but because I recognized it earlier and was really proactive in taking time off work and resting, I got better sooner. Um, but yeah, I think it's not like anything I'd ever experienced before. And I think the idea of when people say like, "Oh, I'm burnt out from work," and they'll go on a holiday and they'll feel better, is like, I don't think anything that cannot help you with autistic burnout. It is literally like cell deep.
yeah.
Um,
I think like burnout is overused. I think everyone gets a bit overstressed and overtired. Like, well, we're human beings. What it sounds like, and obviously I've not experienced that myself. I've definitely had ADHD burnout, and I think it is the exact same, that we have so much capacity mentally and physically as humans, and for whatever reason, when that capacity is massively reduced, our capacity to adapt into, the neurodiversity into the neurotypical world is just diminished. So that's where these feelings feel amplified, right? Because you can't manage them the way that you had. And I definitely remember that myself, that I just woke up and the emotional dysregulation was, I just remember it was during a period when I was overworking, and the RS at that point I had, I was actually earning more money than I am now. It was too much. It was too much. And the RSD from like one person leaving, even though it would not impact me financially at all, it was like being told my house was being taken off me. And I
yeah,
remember it being fucking wild. And so I think it is that, isn't it? Or the symptoms, the projections that you have just amplified to that point where it is debilitating. So for you, there's so many things that can cause these burnouts, right? And I know for myself, it was just doing too much and never actually allowing myself the time to rest, recuperate. And at that time, I didn't know it was ADHD and how to work with my brain at all. So what were your sort of causes? Because you mentioned one was kind of pre-diagnosis and one was
yeah,
more recently. So what were your sort of call? I know everyone's story will be so unique, but just for the listeners out of interest, what do you think put you into
yeah.
that state of
Well,
burnout?
I think like basically, and I do ADHD coaching through Access to Work. So I've spoken about this quite a lot recently with her, and the way she sort of put it, I found really helpful. Is basically she said like burnout occurs when your external environment, so that could be the responsibilities you have, your timetable, how much you're doing, but also your environment in terms of sensory things. And so your external environment and your external demands that are being placed upon you. So that could be demands in terms of a busy work schedule. It could be children. It could be masking. If you're currently like quite high masking, you're doing that every day. It could be if there's like difficult things going on in the world that are impacting you. If that outweighs your internal resources and needs, that is when burnout happens. So your internal resources, sort of like your energy, if you're getting like enough sleep, you're having enough time where you can unmask, that sort of thing. And then your needs in terms of like, these are the things that I need to keep functioning. If those things are being outweighed by what is happening and the things being put on you externally, that's when burnout happens. So I guess I think of it like, if you imagine that people are computers, and you have like like a regular computer that's running its normal programs. If you add in a program that is masking in the background. So if you're masking most of the day, that is draining the life out of this computer every single day. And then maybe you're working more, maybe I don't know, you're going through a difficult relationship or you lost somebody recently, whatever. These are all massive draining programs that are going on in the background. So anytime you try and use a computer to do something simple like go to Lidl or email back a client, it can't do it because it's being drained by all of these things. And I think burnout happens when it gets to the point where the computer just shuts off and it can't do it anymore.
Sure. So you said obviously a little holiday to Spain isn't going to fix burnout as much as we would love it to. So practically, and I know that I mean many things and it will be very unique, but based on maybe that sort of model of what causes it, what's been productive for you and what do you know about getting out of burnout? Because
Mhm.
that's the gold, right? Is people
Yeah.
go, yeah, I'm in burnout, but what do I do about it? And that'll be really interesting to hear like your experience
Mhm.
and what you know about it too.
Sure. So I guess the two biggest things. First thing is if you look at that like external responsibilities and environment, what can you take out of that that drains you? So is it possible for you to find a new job that's less demanding, to work from home more, to ask reasonable adjustments? Are there friendships that maybe you need to end that are draining, or relationships? Are you able to remove yourself from like a negative home environment? So I've previously found living in house shares incredibly difficult. I now live with my boyfriend, which I find a lot easier. Are you able to mask less? Like, what can you take away from what's being placed upon you that is currently draining you?
Okay.
And I know for a lot of people that is just not, there's a lot of things that aren't feasible. We have to work. Unfortunately, we're all slaves to capitalism. If you have children, that is obviously a massive demand that is always going to be there. So there's a lot that you can't take away, but are there things that you can? And then I think for me, the biggest thing was when I was signed off recently for 3 weeks, and because of autistic burnout. The first week, I was like, okay, right. So I'm going to go to the gym and then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do some crochet and I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this and blah, 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 blah. And to me, I was like, oh, that's resting because I'm not working, but I was still doing content. I was still exercising like in like sort of a rigid way. I was still trying to like stick to my social plans. And then it didn't get better. And I was like, okay, I actually need to do nothing. And so genuinely, it was the week where it was the first heat wave in the UK. For 3 days in a row, I genuinely barely moved from my sofa. I sat and watched a TV show and crocheted, and that was literally all I did. And it was horrible and it felt so uncomfortable. And my internal monologue the whole time was like, you're so lazy, you're wasting this time, you're a failure. But I just tried to like actually sit with that and be like, if resting for 3 days causes me to crash out that hard, the problem is my thinking because I'm not a machine. It's okay for me to sit for 3 days and do nothing. So I think finding ways to rest that feel actually restful and restorative for you, thinking about like, am I eating enough? Am I getting enough sleep? Obviously, a key to literally every single element of our health is eating and sleeping. Getting outside, I think getting off your phone as much as possible, as much as we can feel like, oh, I'll just sit on TikTok, that's relaxing. Obviously, it's not actually relaxing for your nervous system or your body. Again, nervous system regulation is a really big one as well. So one thing I'd like to do is like have like lavender oil in the shower just to turn that into like a more soothing experience. But yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for quite a while. I don't know how much you want me to say, but obviously there's quite a few bits on my page as well, sort of listing things in more detail. But yeah, I'd say looking at your lifestyle realistically and being like, okay, what is draining me? Am I even filling my cup at all, or am I completely neglecting all my own needs?
Sure.
Removing what you can, trying not to fix the problem by adding stuff in. You want to not add in more responsibility and more like, oh, okay, well, if I just do this 8 step morning routine, then I'll be fine. Like, don't do that. And then, yeah, taking the time to really, really rest in a way where you're not just beating yourself up the whole time. Like, I think you need to be okay with like doing nothing for a bit. And it could be that it lasts 2 years. Like it's not going to be an immediate process. But being patient and compassionate. And sorry, one more thing to add that I would say is my favorite skill that I've ever learned in regards to mental health, and I think it really applies to neurodivergence as well, is radical acceptance, which
Yeah.
is like a dialectical behavioral therapy skill of just like stop trying to fight your reality. You are in burnout. You cannot now like
Yeah.
negotiate your way out of this. You can't shame yourself out of it. This is what is happening right now. You need to like accept that that is what is happening and be compassionate to yourself and stop judging yourself for being here because it's not going to help.
I love that. So what it sounds like then obviously is definitely taking that period of rest. But I think what people can probably take from that, and I really picked up on that, is when we are in this state of like stress and overwhelm, we often think about making like what little changes can I make to my life now? And you mentioned like a few little things you can do, like the sort of the nervous system regulation, like just making your day-to-day tasks a bit more relaxing and something I'm passionate about. But you're saying that if you're getting into deep burnout, like not a bit of stress, deep burnout, you actually need to look at your life and make potentially some quite difficult and hard
Yeah.
decisions. And I've definitely done that myself, and not realizing that I was necessarily doing it for burnout, but the more that I've understood my neurodiversity and what gets me into those not so helpful states is I have had to make some harder decisions about, okay, maybe I can't work 12-hour days every day and build this empire like I want, because I'm going to become really unhappy and reach burnout. So I've had to look at I've changed quite a few things in my work schedule. So I finish a little bit earlier, not because, and my initial internal dialogue was like, you're lazy, you should be working till 9 p.m. every night. But when I was working till 7, 8, 9, doing calls late, burnout. So now I'm
Hmm.
pretty strict. My last call is 5 till 6.
Hmm.
That's what I'm going to do. I will take a day off on a weekend because I need to just rest in a way that feels good for Lucy. And, same with like, I don't put myself in situations if I don't feel like going out, like I don't like clubs and loud music and things like that, find it too overstimulating. So I'm not going to put myself in that environment just because my friends are going and feel stressed. So I think sometimes it does come with some bigger life adjustments. And like I said,
Yeah.
that radical acceptance of, yeah, maybe your friend can work. Maybe I've got colleagues that can do 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I can't, and that's how it is. I've got friends that can go to a nightclub and love every second of it. I can't. And it's
Mm.
accepting that that's who you are. And either, I guess, I like to say, choose your hard. That's my little phrase. It's
Yeah.
you burn out or you're having to make some adaptations to your life. Which is the hard you want to choose? And I guess
Yes.
it's not easy, is it? Sometimes accepting that I can't do this job, or
Oh my
this
God.
this way of hanging out with my friends doesn't work for me. It can feel like you're failing, and that then again
Yeah.
that like failure feeling coming in. But it's radical acceptance, I think, is like the key there, isn't it? To go, well, here's what it is. Let's
Yeah.
do something about it.
I think as well, it can be so difficult if you are late diagnosed because and you're in burnout for the first time because you are gonna, like, you're not gonna be in a position where you are maybe able to pick up on internal cues. So I
Sure.
remember when I was first in burnout and it lasted almost a year, I'd say. And it was like, okay, exercise is good for you. Like it releases, what's the thing it releases?
Endorphins,
Dopamine?
dopamine.
Yeah,
This is pretty much
endorphins,
everything.
all of it. It's good for you, right? So I was like, okay, maybe I should exercise. I feel really tired. If I don't exercise, am I being lazy? If I don't exercise, am I not helping myself? If
Yeah.
I do exercise, am I forcing myself to do something that's going to make me feel worse and more burnt out? And so I think because I've been so high masking for so long, I was so used to ignoring whatever my body was telling me. And so when I was in burnout, I had no idea like whether I was ready to get going again or like what I had the capacity for and what would help me because I'd just ignored that for so many years and just done what I'd forced myself to do, what I thought was like the right way to live. And so then when I was in burnout and I was trying to navigate my way out of it, I had no like sort of compass that was guiding me. And so it was a lot of trial and error and being like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do like, I'll agree to 2 social plans this week, getting to Sunday and being like, I'm never doing that again. Like that was a big mistake. And maybe spending a bit too long not doing enough and then sort of becoming a bit lethargic and that sort of thing. So I think it was difficult with that trial and error, but yeah, you definitely have to become aware of your own limits and boundaries. And like you said, accept that and be like, it doesn't mean I'm a shit person or I'm lazy or whatever. I am like fine the way that I am and forcing myself to work more hours or push myself harder, it's not going to win me an award. Like it's
Right.
just going to burn me out.
And I think as well, it's just having that acceptance that it can feel a bit weird that if you've pushed through things in the past, something that I try and say to clients is, because they might say things like, oh, now that I'm ADHD, I'm realizing that I struggle with this, but I've done this all my life. And it's like, yeah, but what did
Mm.
you do to get through that? How does it make you feel? So, yeah, maybe you did manage to go out 2 days, but you were exhausted come Monday. Something I've learned about myself this year through sort of this sort of understanding is the only way I was like, but you used to love going out partying, Lucy. I was like, yeah, because the only way you could do it was to get absolutely off your face with
Yeah.
alcohol. Like the thought now of me going to, like, I've got a few social plans coming up. I'm like, I am going to have to drink to get through that
Mm.
or be so anxious on edge the whole time. And it's that radical acceptance of, hey, do you know what? That's how I am. So
Yeah.
it's kind of that adjustment period as well of if you've done something before and been okay, but you have to realize, but you weren't okay. You were coping by doing X, Y, and Z, or you
Mhm.
were left feeling Y, but now you know about it.
Yeah.
I feel like we could chat about this for 20 years. I'm
Yeah.
loving it. I'm loving it. So just to wrap up, I do want to ask a little bit about sort of your plans and intentions with the page, because unlike quite a few of the other people that I've spoken to who have businesses, some which of course we have to make money somehow, you're kind of doing this as a passion project, which I actually have in some, quite a bit more respect for in some ways, because, when I put content out, I do, kind of make money from it. And that's not purely why I do it. But for you, you're doing this to just help people and raise awareness, which is absolutely incredible. But do you have any sort of future plans for things you want to do and take it? Because, you have got such an incredible platform and knowledge that this is my business head on now, that it almost feels a waste that, you're just there to just put the content out. What are your sort of hopes for the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I'd love to do. I think, to be honest, because obviously I work full time. It's not like my job. It's kind of, it is like a passion and a hobby. I would love to be able to reduce my hours at work and spend more time on it because I do enjoy it more than my sort of regular job. Um, but I think when I think about the future and where I'd like to go, I would love to work in like research, potentially work in the NHS to do with like expanding understanding of neurodivergence and mental health. So
Amazing.
my sort of background, I have a degree in anthropology, so working in that and like research around mental health and neurodivergence. Suicide and autism is something that I'm really passionate about and interested in. But I think in terms of my page, I don't really know. Maybe I should have more of an idea. I'm just enjoying it at the moment.
I love it though.
If
Great.
I would love to like write a book, I'd love to host an event. I don't know. I'm open to anything, to be honest. I think just at the moment, I'm still figuring out that, because also I was just diagnosed with ADHD like a few weeks ago, so I'm figuring out for me the balance and how I can organize my time and how much time I can commit to different things. But
Wow.
I really love it. I get a lot of DMs. I love like chatting to people, and I actually did start like a sort of peer social group in where I live in Bristol, for neurodivergent women or women that struggle with their mental health. And so I organise like social meetups it's normally about every couple of weeks. So that's amazing. I'd love to do more stuff like that. Obviously we don't make money from it, but it's lovely to meet people and sort of help people form those friendships and stuff. So I would love to do more stuff like that, helping people connect. But yeah, I don't really know outside. If you've got any ideas, let me know.
I mean, a lot of those things that you want to do as well, I think like now, because everything's social media, isn't it? Like the more presence you have, the more opportunities are created. And in all areas of life now, before it was just influencery sort of things, but I know in lots of roles and opportunities it is that. So, if you have got such a passion of sharing what you know and the knowledge, the bigger the platform, the more likely you are to get the speaking gigs and the writing opportunities
Yeah,
and stuff. So, and I mean, that's why I played the social media game. I call it a social media game of growing it and stuff. Of course, I want to have more people see the content and help more people, but I know that comes with more opportunity, and the opportunity
yeah,
means I can then help more people. So,
sure.
because we can only do so much one to one and stuff anyway. But honestly, I
Yeah,
respect it so much. I absolutely love it, and and there are a few people in this game for the wrong reasons, but I do think, speaking to the amount of people I've spoken to, whether they are business owners or just posting their story or knowledge online about neurodiversity, I think the common ground is, I'd say 95% plus for people aren't doing it with the lens of, oh, neurodiversity is trending and it can make money. It's neurodiversity is a problem and I want to do something about it to help people. And I think it is a really beautiful space to be in. So as she shared earlier, her Instagram handle, if you do feel seen, heard, please do go connect. And you've heard today she's a very nice person. She's not gonna, and she's got nothing to sell you anyway, so she won't try and
yeah.
like
Anything to tell you that.
emotionally manipulate you into anything in the DMs or anything. But I think this is the great thing about, when you said there's so much information, it can be overwhelming, which it can. I think this is one of the great things, though, is that it is so easy to find people and connect. And when you can feel quite alone, it is quite nice just to open up your phone and just see someone else is going through it or understands it can be absolutely amazing. And, I say it all the time, and I'm sure you're the same, that please just feel free to pop us a message if you've listened to this and just say, hey,
Yeah,
thank you, or hey, can I ask you about this? Because I know myself, if I can, someone, bless her, I've just seen it pop up now. She'd be messaging me about something and she's like, I know your coaching is paid. I'm really sorry. I'm like, hey, I'm answering your question. If that helps you to go and do something productive with your life, that's amazing.
yeah, absolutely. And I learn so much as well from people, like
Yeah.
tips and different skills that people have. It's amazing. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been,
No, thank you for having me.
I knew it was going to be a great chat, but this has been brilliant. And I'm sure everyone will agree. But yeah, please go drop her a follow. I'll leave it all in the description-y stuff as well. And then for all the regular listeners, I will see you next time.